everyone, welcome to Queer Stories. Today we're going to be talking about Orange is the New Black, which is why I put on the only orange thing that I wear in my closet, because I was like, let me be festive, and then realized I own only one orange thing in my entire closet. Who owns anything orange anyway? Is it like they deliberately choose the prison outfit to be orange because they want you to wear a color that nobody looks good in? Anyway, food for thought for next time. So let's dive in. What is Orange is the New Black? Orange is the New Black is one of the first original Netflix series that they created under their own brand. So Netflix premiered this show in 2013. After 7 whole seasons, it finally finished airing. So the show is complete. And if you haven't seen it before, you could literally spend days and days binge watching it from beginning to end. So if you haven't yet seen it, you might be wondering, is this a show for me? The first thing that you need to know about this show is that it has won a lot of awards. Not only is it Netflix's most watched original series, but it was nominated for 12 different Emmys in its very first year. Its second season got 4 Emmy nominations. And over the course of the series, it's had 6 Golden Globe nominations, 6 Writers Guild of America nominations, a Producers Guild of America award, an American Film Institute award, and a Peabody Award. So overall, we can say it's won a lot of awards. So what is the story? The most interesting thing about Orange is the New Black is it's actually based on a real story. There is a woman whose name is Piper Kerman who wrote a book called Orange is the New Black, My Year in Women's Prison. So Piper actually went to prison, and the story of Piper in the show is quite similar to the story of Piper in real life. What happened to Piper was she was a bisexual woman, and she fell in love with another woman, and she traveled the world, and her girlfriend was working in an international drug trafficking ring. So Piper tries to sort of not get involved in the business side of the relationship, but once or twice, her girlfriend Alex convinces her to do something illegal, and she gets caught. And so then she gets sentenced to 13 months in prison. It's not like a maximum security prison. It's not where they send all of the serial killers and murderers. This is a minimum security prison. And the story of the show is really just the evolution of Piper's experience there, but it's also telling the stories of all of the other inmates who are in jail with her. The other interesting part of the story is that, as I mentioned before, she's bisexual, so after all of this stuff went down with the drug trafficking ring, she and Alex broke up, and Piper ended up dating a man, and in fact she was engaged to be married to this man. And so at the moment that she goes to prison, she's engaged to be married. And then after she arrives at prison, who does she discover in the prison with her? Her ex-girlfriend, who got her into trouble in the first place. So cue the sexual tension! You know, I've got to say, the thing that I love the most about this story is that because of the context in which the story is told, it's really a show about women's stories. So you have so many women because it's a prison full of women, and there's maybe a few guys. There's some prison guards that are male, the assistant warden is male, so there's a few males in the story. But generally speaking, the majority of the players in this story are female. And it's not very often that you see that. You know, apart from the L word for obvious reasons, when was the last time that you saw a show that was primarily telling female stories? It just doesn't happen very often. And so I thought it was really, really fun because each woman is different and each one has a different backstory. And some of them are gay and some of them are straight. And it's just this whole hodgepodge of different people. And even though they've gotten themselves into trouble, you can always find a way to relate to them because you're like, oh man, yeah, I mean, she had an abusive boyfriend. I can relate to that. Or this other person just kind of got caught doing something wrong one time. Or this other person was on drugs. I mean, how many of us have experimented with drugs in our youth, right? So I think there's always something that you can kind of latch onto that you can relate to in the stories of these women. The other thing I personally love about this show is that it does portray bisexual women. They exist and they're in the show. And as a bisexual woman myself, it's not very often that you see bisexuals portrayed on the screen. And so I absolutely loved the fact that they had bisexual characters. So telling of women's stories is an interesting thing to dive a little bit deeper into. If you don't know, there is somebody called Alison Bechdel. Forgive me if I totally butchered that name. I don't know how you're supposed to actually pronounce that name. She created a test to just get an idea of how male-dominated a piece of media is. And it's a very basic test. The test goes like this. Number 1, does the media have at least 2 women in it? Number 2, do they talk to each other? And number 3, about something other than a man. And the reason for this test is that often when we see women portrayed in the media, in film, in TV, and God forbid, especially in video games, don't even get me started, we'll get into video games soon, women are often portrayed only in their relation to the men around them. So as a girlfriend of this man or a best friend of this other man. And if you take this Bechdel test and you apply it to some of your favorite TV shows and movies and things from your youth, you might actually discover that your favorite things fail the test. And it's really sad because, you know, there's a certain aspect of women's stories that I think, you know, we would like to see told, and we would like to see them told by women who can tell their own stories, not by the men who are telling the stories for the women. The other kind of interesting thing about this show is that it's neither a drama nor a comedy, or both, depending on how you look at it. And so in terms of the awards that it's won some awards in comedy and it's won some awards in drama. Later on, it ended up having to be classified in the drama area just because of some of the themes that are brought up. But the interesting thing about the show is it is comedic. It's funny. And so it really engages with you because you kind of laugh. And sometimes you laugh and think, oh man, I really shouldn't be laughing about that. But it also deals with some really heavy topics, right? So it goes into, like I said, drug use and abuse and rape, families, pregnancy. Like there's, oh my gosh, there's so many really serious themes in this show. I'm not going to say that every single episode is good though. There are definitely some episodes where you're like, oh, okay, this feels like we could move on to the next episode. But if you hang in there for those episodes that you don't like, you're guaranteed to find something that resonates with you later on down the line. So there's a lot of LGBT characters in the show, which I suppose is not surprising because if we just take a general cross-section of women in the world, there's probably about 10% of women that are some kind of LGBT. And so if you were to take a cross-section of prison, it's not unusual that you would see people that are already lesbian that are in prison. But then there might also be, for example, people that exhibit behaviors in prison that they wouldn't necessarily outside because they're seeking out companionship and love and someone to talk to. So, you know, it's really interesting to explore the LGBT dynamics in this show. So if we just take a look at the numbers, there's actually 7 lesbian characters in the show, 4 bisexual characters, 1 pansexual, 2 gay men, and a transgender woman. So let's talk about a little bit more about the trans character in the show. I thought it was very interesting to me to find out, first of all, when the show was made back in 2013, I didn't really know or think about the fact that sometimes trans people go to jail too. And I find it interesting that a trans woman would be sent to a female jail. I think that is the way it should be, but I also find it interesting that in some of the deep red states where they're very anti-trans, that they would still be providing the facility for a trans person to go to a jail in their real gender. And I remember when I was young, I watched a prison series called Oz. And back in those days, you had some people that were in the male jail that were portraying themselves in a more feminine manner. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be better to be putting them in a female jail? Because they are targets for harassment and abuse. And something I think is really interesting about seeing this person in the female jail is that for the majority of her experience in this jail, she is treated as one of the girls. But there are occasionally some moments where she might get in a fight with somebody else in the jail, which would happen between two women anyway. But because she's bigger and stronger, then they start to view her as an outsider. And so I think that they treated that very elegantly in the show. When the show first came out, it was also the first time that I personally remember seeing a trans character that was played by a trans woman. And Laverne Cox is just amazing. Like, she's just amazing in this role. So she plays the character Sophia. And she does such a great job. I can't even tell you. She just brings life and genuine humor and passion and just spirit. And so she really makes you embrace this character. There are a few scenes where they show her pre-transition. And I only actually found out after I looked it up online that it's her twin brother. She has a twin brother. And it's her twin brother who plays the character pre-transition. I'm like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Laverne Cox is also an activist in real life. And she spends quite a bit of time and energy trying to talk to people that might not be aware of trans issues about those issues. And I think it's so brave of her because there's so much ignorance out there. And when you see how beautiful she is getting up there with the Human Rights Campaign and telling her story, it's just absolutely amazing to see. And so for me, Orange is the New Black was a springboard for her to develop the clout that she could use to then tell trans stories in the future. The 8 lesbian characters are, first of all, Piper's ex-girlfriend Alex, who's played by Laura Prepon. There's Nikki, played by Natasha Lyonne. Pusey, played by Samira Wiley. There's Carrie, also known as Boo, who's played by Leah Delaria. There's Suzanne Crazy Eyes, who's played by Uzo Aduba. Trisha, played by Madeleine Brewer. And Daddy Duarte, played by Vicky Martinez. Ruby Rose also makes a cameo appearance in one of the seasons as the character Stella Carlin. I absolutely love these lesbian characters. I fell in love with Pusey, who is just the most sweet and adorable. Oh, you just want to hug her and kiss her and burrito her up and she's lovely. And then you've got Boo, who is unapologetically butch, and I love that. I love Boo. I think she is one of my favorite characters. And then Crazy Eyes is, I think, probably the most memorable character in the story because she struggles with some mental illness. But she's also at the same time so kind of like genuinely seeking out love that you're like, an affection that you're just rooting for her. You're like, Crazy Eyes, you're awesome. So many of these characters have just gotten under my skin. For the bisexual characters, obviously you've got Piper herself. You have Lorna, who's played by Yael Stone. Dayanara, who's played by Dasha Polanco. And Linda, who's played by Beth Dover. I think probably my favorite character in the bisexual realm is going to be Lorna. She kind of has this like 1950s vibe about her, and she's definitely got a screw loose. She has some kind of kleptomaniac tendencies, and she's like a pathological liar. But she's also really sweet and lovely, and she's the first person that makes Piper feel welcome in the jail. And so you really, the whole time, you're just kind of rooting for her to find happiness. The pansexual character is an interesting one. The character is called Brooke, and she's played by Kimiko Glenn. And the character is half Japanese and half Scottish. And she's like really interested in all things political. So she actually gets thrown in jail for something political. And she doesn't really sort of describe what her sexuality is in a lot of detail, but she just immediately sort of gravitates towards people. She talks too much, though. Like, girl. And then the two gay characters are Desi, who is played by Brad William Hanke, and then Jason Figueroa, who is played by Peter Rini. And they're really kind of minor characters in terms of the plotline, so I won't really talk about them right now, but they're there. So as you can see, this is a huge amount of LGBT representation. And just look at this spectrum. It's so exciting to see in a TV show. So my overall verdict is I think this show is really important just in terms of pop culture and understanding like the history of LGBT TV because it's unapologetic and it's kind of similar to Queer as Folk in that way. It's unapologetic and it explores a lot of different types of people, and it was hugely successful. I think a lot of people who don't belong to the LGBT community watch this show, which is really interesting, right? It's really interesting to see people that are lesbian in real life and are transgender in real life able to tell a little bit of their own stories through the characters on the screen. And so it's definitely worth watching, and it's worth sticking with it because each season has its own kind of theme to it. And you do get to explore new characters as the new seasons come along. There are some episodes, as I said, that you won't enjoy, but then there are other episodes where you would definitely go like, oh my God, and you would be like, ah, and sometimes even you might cry. So I think that it's worth that emotional journey. I really think you would enjoy watching it. So, if you haven't seen it yet, watch Orange is the New Black. It's on Netflix. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, then you can hit subscribe. If you'd like to support me in continuing to create content like this, then you can become one of my patrons. Take care. See you next time. Hey everyone, welcome to Queer Stories. And over the course of the series, it's had 6 Golden Globe nominations. Oh, I got that wrong. Kind of, you know, like the way in, no, I can't remember that. Oh, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Laverne Cox is also an activist in real life, and she sometimes you think, oh man, I shouldn't be laughing about that.